Thanks so much, everybody, for coming to our second 5 for 5 of the 2023-2024 season. My name is Courtney Cosden. I am a soil health instructor with University of Idaho Extension and NRCS. This is our Idaho Soil Health 5 for 5 roundtable. So the way that this works, if you haven't been on before, is we have 3 awesome producers today who are going to be talking to us about soil health in root crops. And they will have about 5 minutes, 5 to 10, 5 to 8 minutes to present 5 slides or less to you all about this subject.
This is a root crop deal.
Hold on. Let's mute everybody real quick. So all of these are recorded on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to post that in the chat right now, the link to that YouTube. So this is our second one, and we'll have one more 5 for 5 on March 26th. And the theme of that one is going to be nutrient management. And I'm lining up some folks for that now. So, and that will be our last one. And then we'll kind of start our summer programming with field days and whatnot. So, oh yeah, one more thing about the way this works. So each presenter, well, we'll have a presenter present, and then they'll take questions immediately after, and then the next presenter will go. So you don't have to hold your questions to the end. Just go ahead and ask them of the producer right when they are done. And I think with that, we should be good to go. And yeah, Lad, you're up if you're ready, and I'll share your screen so your PowerPoint is ready.
All righty, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, awesome. Well, I appreciate Courtney and Linda putting this together. I think these are fun opportunities to collaborate and network. And they did the Magic Valley Soil Health class a couple weeks ago or a week ago, which was awesome as well. So we appreciate them putting that together. So just by way of introduction, my name is Lad Wahlen. So I'm a 4th generation potato farmer in Southeast Idaho. A little history about me. In 2012, I finished up college. I did agronomy and business. I finished up, came home, farmed with my dad for 4 years. In 2016, my wife and I just began to acquire some of our own acreage and started farming on our own. And I've always had a lot of interest in just soil health and natural, sustainable approaches to agriculture. And then regenerative has been a big thing the past few years as well. So our focus has really been in regenerative agriculture and potato production, because potato production by nature can be quite invasive when it comes to tillage and chemical usage and for fertilizer usage and whatnot. So just ways that we can implement things into potato production that are regenerative has been very important to me. Currently, we run a potato production model farm with the Nature Conservancy, where we're trying a lot of different things like companion cropping, different tillage practices, rotation practices, fertility applications, things like that, by biological approaches and whatnot to potato production. So we've been doing that. And then currently, our farm right now, we have both organic acreage and non-organic acreage. So I have experience in organic potato production and in conventional potato production. But just going back to this first slide right here, this kind of talks about what our focus is in this potato production system with our focus on regenerative agriculture. So we're really trying to focus on diversity. So for example, pre-seeding potatoes after a wheat crop, we're trying to get a significant species, multi-species crop in there with good growth to feed the soil biology, add organic matter, and just all the benefits that cover crops have. We're trying to minimize our soil disturbance. So we're trying to reduce tillage to just a single pass prior to planting. So we're really trying to get to a low disturbance number of passes in this potato production system. And then we're trying to maintain living roots and armor the soil, in that 12-month period with potato production and preceding it. We're trying to keep the soil covered and living root system in the soil for 80% of the time versus, a traditional 33% of the time. And then we try to integrate animals as much as we can. Cover crops, we either try to have cattle or sheep, or just, some ruminants that are out there grazing, have a little bit of animal impact, and that can just help stimulate that biology. So you want to go to the next slide, Courtney? Oh, so that's just a picture. It's just a fun picture. There's not much information there, but just kind of illustrates our focus on soil health. That's one of my boys. He is holding up a mustard plant, it looks like. And we're just trying to have some fun as we do this and tell our story a little bit. You can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so this is something that I just wanted to share. So this is like a 1-year result. So these are fields that are going into potato production last year. So there's 3 different fields that we had. We had our first field that after winter wheat was harvested, we came in and no-tilled a 12 species cover crop. Our second field we came in and tilled after we got the weed off, and we put in a single species cover crop. And then our field 3, we just had 1 tillage event and no cover crop. So I thought there was some interesting findings in these 3 different fields. So field number 1 that had no tillage plus the biology of this 12 species cover crop, it had the best fungi to bacteria ratio. Field number 2 that had a disturbance event and just a single species cover crop, it didn't have quite as best ratio, but it still had it better than field 3, which had no cover crop and 1 tillage event. And then if you go down to the second line, field number 1, the fungi population was 10 times that of field number 3. And then if you're looking at the bottom, if we're looking at kind of macrobiology, earthworms, we had 3 times the number of earthworms in field number 1 than we did in field number 3. So I think this just kind of goes to show that the more we focus on cover cropping and minimizing disturbance in potato production systems, it will result in better soil biology, microbiology, macrobiology, which I think is very beneficial. So our focus really with regenerative agriculture is we want to maintain profitability and yield. We want to minimize expenses, but we want to have such a resilient and robust soil health and plants that can withstand diseases and be resilient. So that's kind of the direction that we're headed. We were able to raise a good chunk of our potatoes last year without any pesticides, which is our goal. Outside of our organic stuff we did, this was conventional stuff that we did without pesticides. We still had some fertility inputs and whatnot, but our focus is really what can we do to stimulate biology, plant health, and have less need for chemical and synthetic inputs. So yeah, that was pretty simple. I just had a couple slides there. But Courtney, if there's any questions, we could do those, or we can go on to the next presenter.
Yeah, thank you, Lad. Who has questions for Lad?
Everybody needs their coffee.
I know, right? It's too early on a Monday. That's a Tuesday.
Lad, about input costs and this business of reducing pesticides down to 0 and yields. I mean, there's a lot going on there in terms of inputs and costs and yield hit and those sorts of things. Maybe you could talk a little about that.
Yeah, you bet, Sean. Thanks for that question. So yeah, there is a lot going on there. I wish I had some solid numbers I could give you, but I mean, obviously the name of the game in farming is to be profitable. But this year we're going to try to track things just a little bit better to see how regenerating the soil and focusing on plant health and soil biology, how it in turn affects our external inputs, chemical inputs, and the reduction of that, how it makes us more profitable. So that's really the overall goal. So Sean, hopefully in a year, I can give you some better answers. Up to this point, we just kind of have a lot of anecdotal evidence, not statistical or empirical stuff. But this year we plan to track it a lot better and be able to have some solid answers for you.
Did you feel like your yields were reasonably good, minus the pesticides? And you feel like your bottom line at the end of the season was?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I always go back to a single experience I had. So One of my first organic potato crops, I had 0 inputs in it, obviously outside of compost and some fish products, but the soil biology was to a state where I was able to get 450 sacks, which was awesome. I was super happy with that on an organic outcome. And the profitability there was huge just because we had such little amount of input. So how to replicate that into a conventional system with a lot of externalities, I'm not sure how to do exactly. But in my experience, even the stuff we did last year that wasn't organic, we still saw very competitive yields for sure. So I think it's very possible and probable, and I think it will be more profitable once we're able to achieve that, soil biology and plant health and whatnot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I look forward to hearing more from you in the future as this goes. That's great stuff.
Cross your fingers. There's always failures. We've had plenty of failures, but that's our goal.
All right.
Well, just like at the forum, we love hearing about the failures too. Good learning opportunities. And I love that you did the comparison between the 3 fields and the different cover crops and how different the biology looks on your PLFA results. That's really interesting.
Yeah, in just a year too. So I think we think of soil health like in a systems approach or long-term, which it is long-term, but I think we can do a lot more in a single year, good or bad, than sometimes we think.
Definitely. Just by feeding those biology. All right, is there any other questions for Lad? Okay, well, I think we can, move along. Thank you so much, Lad. All right, and now we will go on to Luke Adams, and I'll bring your PowerPoint up right now, Luke. All right, good to go?
Perfect.
Great.
So I'll start just quick introduction. Luke Adams, I farm just north of Rupert, primarily sugar beets and malt barley, and got into cover crops about, I guess it's been 8 or 9 years ago now. Started with some work with the University of Idaho. They had some grant money and we were testing things out. And then that kind of morphed into kind of the approach I take now to cover crops. So I'm just going to do 2 things this morning. Is I'm going to go through kind of the framework that I use, and then I'll go through my actual process of what I do when I grow beets behind cover crop with no tillage. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Sorry, Luke, give me 1 sec. It's on the wrong screen for some reason, and it's not pulling it up in a presenter view. But maybe I think we might just have to stick with this. Okay.
Yeah, that'll work though, no problem.
Sorry about that.
So the framework I always kind of walk through is if I'm going, and I'm going to talk about sugar beets at the end, but depending if I'm going to go to sugar beets or if we're going to potatoes, I use different mixes. And so for me, I'm a conventional grower, and so I'm primarily focused on using this as an input to maintain or increase my yield and return. And so I really focus on the crash crop and what's going to help it. So when I do my mixes, I make sure that I primarily focus on, for me, nematode control. I have a pretty heavy sugar beet rotation. And so I'm doing trap crops and trying to sort through and only use different species that are going to help me go neutral or reduce nematode for both potatoes and sugar beets. And so I always kind of rank those goals. For me, the big ones, specifically where I'm at, is killing nematode and then some wind protection in the spring. I don't have real big, blow sand issues or erosion problems, but wind protection for getting sugar beets going. And I only choose, I tend to do, 2 to 3 way mixes, sometimes just monocrop mix also. So I try to only go for diversity if I think it's going to benefit the cash crop. Establishment, I really focus on a lot of fertility in my rotation. And so, and we're usually in a hurry that time of year behind barley. And so we'll jump in. I don't drill a lot of my cover crops. I almost always just blow them on with fertilizer, and I tend to put a lot of fertilizer down, and all my fertilizer, as far as phosphate and things for the following crop, to limit how many passes across the field that I'm paying for. So, and I'll talk specific about what I put down for my sugar beets, but I will run a shallow disc to be able to make sure I get soil contact, and then I'll usually put 90 or 100 pounds of urea plus all my phosphate down. I don't like the volunteer barley because I'm going into a direct seed situation. So I spray out my volunteer grain. So I'm left with only the cover crop that I establish. And then I've figured out, like was mentioned, right? We make mistakes, we pay tuition with those mistakes, and kind of learn that you really have to actively manage the cover crop like it's a crop, which can be hard in August when we're busy, in combines and doing other things. And so just really, I've found that I've got to focus and treat it like an input crop, and really, give it as much care and focus as I would any other crop. And heat units are such a critical component of successfully getting a good cover. And so we really focus on speed behind the combine. The quicker we can get seed and water back in there to get it established, and really take advantage of those heat units in August. And then just dig as much as possible to kind of see what's going on. And if nothing convinces you that the cover crop's helpful, a few shovelfuls of dirt and what it does, I think it was mentioned, really, it's amazing what we can do, not even in a year, but in a few months, just making sure we keep that soil active. And then for me, I'm focused because I'm going to direct seed into this on managing the residue. I do that by what species I select. And then also I will usually graze whenever I can, and graze really intensely to both disturb the voles. Grazing with sheep or cattle are great for disturbing vole population. And it also gets the residue down to a manageable amount to be able to direct seed into. If you go to the next slide, I'll talk specifically about what I do going into sugar beets. So I just wanted to run through just kind of real practically what we actually do. So a lot of times I'll do a Concord radish, which is a nematode trap crop, a master white mustard, which is a trap crop, and Phacelia, which is a forb that helps pull unavailable phosphate and make it available. And this is kind of a three-way mix that I like a lot. You get a little bit more stemminess from the mustard, a little more snow catch, but all these, and where I'm at, where I don't have blow sand, all of these winter terminate, which helps me with my residue management. If we move into the sand, we would swap, some of those components out if I need something to be green in the spring. But most of my heavier dirt out north, I wanted all the winter terminate. And then, so just wanted to run through the process of what we do, just so everybody knows kind of, how I get it established, what we do. In the fall, right behind the combine, we either have the straw chopper on and leave the straw, or bale the straw off, either way. But then the first thing we do, we hit it with a short tine harrow, and then I run my high-speed disc real shallow, just a couple 3-4 inches, just to be able to get a seed bed. Then we blow the seed and fertilizer on. For sugar beets, the main mix I do is 90 pounds of urea, about 150 to 170 pounds of phosphate, or units, I should say. And in my elemental sulfur, so I'll usually put, 80 units or so of elemental sulfur. I put that all down with the seed, so then I don't have another fertilizer pass till spring. And then harrow that in, and we turn the water on. If it's a pivot, we'll run until we get a couple inches, kind of refill the profile. If it's wheel lines, I'll water twice. Once everything comes up, I'll jump in with a grass herbicide, and I spray out the chaff rows, because we've just found two things. The competition from the barley is really hard to compete with for the cool season mixes. And the second thing is I don't want a real tough root to, dense root matter to plant into. So I spray out the volunteer grain, and then we'll graze it that fall/winter. And then in the spring, if it's dry enough, I run a short tine harrow through, and that does two things. It will spread out any of the manure from grazing. It'll knock down any of the bowl holes, and just kind of spread the residue around on top. If it's not dry enough, then I'll just plant right into it. But then I have to take my S-tines off because they'll drag on the residue. But I just go in, the second little picture there is actually what the residue looks like without the harrow. It's just kind of matted to the ground. And I have Yetter trash cleaners that open up in front and just plant. I don't have any, it's just a standard setup monosim planter, but I do have Yetter trash cleaners in the front to open that up and plant into. So that's just kind of the process I go through. I don't know if there's any questions. And then, I guess to head the question off, we wouldn't do this if our yield wasn't equal or better to what we're getting on our conventional tillage sugar beets. I'm only able to do about 300 to 500 acres a year just based on water, using this direct seed method. The rest of it we do conventional for our sugar beets.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Luke. And we can take questions for Luke now. And I could start us off actually. I was wondering about the Phacelia, and when you said that you're using that for to make phosphate more available. When did you start, or how did you learn about that? And when you started using it, what did you see differently in like your soil tests, and how kind of that process I'm interested in?
Sure. So that one, it was one of the early on. So its claim to fame is that it supposedly can pull phosphate 7 times better than a cereal can out of unavailable form. I have not seen a movement on soil samples, but what I do notice, and I have a soft spot for Phacelia, I love it because the residue is a real nice dark residue. And I think it darkens, especially my white ground where I have really high calcareous soil. I think getting some of that dark residue helps. But yeah, it's been around a long time. I think it was one of the ones we started with. I can't remember if it was from the University of Idaho when we were looking at it. Or we also went through a process with the NRCS where we were identifying different species that wouldn't host Columbia root knot or sugar beet cyst nematode. And it was one of the ones on the list. There's not that many. There's, I think it's 5 for potatoes and 7 for sugar beets that we were able to come up with when we worked with NRCS, to be able to have diverse mixes, but still neutral or trapping for nematode. And it was one of the items on the list was Phacelia. I just have it's beautiful too. So it blooms purple, and so sometimes as a grower, I think, it's kind of fun to put some of this stuff in just because you enjoy it. And if I'm getting, benefit from my sugar beet crop and it's fun to look at, you get two benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah. Helping the pollinators out too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bee forage is what it really is used for most of the time.
Yeah, it is gorgeous. I love that. I love it. It's beautiful. Any other questions for Luke?
Yeah, Luke, did you try other trap crops that you were not impressed with, and think maybe people might not, people shouldn't spend a whole lot of time with?
Sure. I guess I'll walk through kind of the process over the last like 9 or 10 years. So we started out, so we've looked at the different mustards, and we kind of, when we first started this, I think I equally weighted biofumigation with trapping. And so biofumigation, we would go way heavy on mustards. And there's other mustards like Caliente and just in general, some of the brown mustards that have higher glucosinolates and gas off better. But at that time we were flail shredding and then moldboard plowing the cover crop down. And, over the progression of those years, we've stopped moldboard plowing. because we kind of came to the conclusion that we weren't getting enough benefit from biofumigation, and we were doing more harm with the plow, than good. So once we pulled the plow out and we were really just trying to do underground trapping, that's when we kind of slid more towards the trap radishes. But we've tried, pretty much all the different radishes. Most of them come out of Germany. So we've planted a lot of the different radishes available on the market. And, from a residue standpoint, I like the radish residue better than the mustard residue. But we've really just used mustard and radish as our two traps. I haven't identified or used anything other than that. We plant more diverse mixes sometimes with vetch and flax and bursting clover. But real practically, I tend to do 1 to 3 items in my mixes. Does that answer that, Sean?
Yeah, no, that's great. And that was a white Concord radish was the one you kind of settled on that you're really wild about.
Yeah, so I like Control if I'm going to go to potatoes, Concord if I'm going to go just to sugar beets. I've used Defender, it's an older one. We're trying to there's some newer ones out of Germany that have, the German government actually rates them. We don't do that here, but there's some that have a higher percentage of trapping. So as we're able to get new ones, we'll just keep planting kind of whatever the newer trapping radish is. But pretty much all that started in the 80s in Germany, and we're kind of just riding on their coattails of what they spent time working on.
So you can look that up online, the German ratings for those different radishes.
Yeah, I go to the P.H. Peterson website a lot. So Allied Seed in Western Idaho actually was able to license those from P.H. Peterson and produces them in Idaho. And since we don't recognize the German ratings, they don't really identify them that here. They don't talk about they're rated 1, 2, or 3, but on the P.H. Peterson website, and it translates to English. They have an English version of it. They do talk about it, but so far we're only able to get Control, Concord, and Defender. I haven't heard of any others being available.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love the trap crop concept. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, and we've moved away. We're not chasing the biofumigation part really anymore, just because we've cut so much of that tillage out. And just basically a short tine harrow in the spring.
So are you able to get away from fumigation entirely?
So I have a really long potato rotation, and so I don't have an issue there. But I have not ever tried to fumigate for sugar beet cyst. So we've just used the radish as a maintenance program to keep the sugar beet cyst down, so I can plant non-nematode seed. I still have fields where I haven't got it down low enough, but I try to do this in fields where I have real moderate pressure, and then I'll plant non-nematode seed. And some of that's because of the finance. I figure it cost me about $90 to do extra water, extra fertilizer, plus seed and labor to get that trap crop in. So if I can save, $25 on beet seed, if I can save on a couple passes in the spring, so, if I'm not running, a ripper or a roller harrow, and try to get some of that investment back that way.
Yeah, crop rotation and trap crops. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Luke before we let him off the hook? All right. Well, thank you so much, Luke. We really appreciate it. All right. Next, and last but not least, we have Mr. Blake Matthews. If you're all ready, Blake.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
So my name is Blake Matthews. I farm in Oakley, south of Burley, with my dad and my brother, where we farm potatoes, sugar beets, corn, wheat, malt barley, alfalfa. We also run a mother cow herd as well as a feedlot. So some of our crops come to the feedlot for feed. And then, like I say, we also run our mother cow herd. So we've kind of been down the regenerative / soil health road for about the last 10 years or so, really focusing on biologicals, cover crops, and that kind of stuff. What I want to talk about a little bit today is something that we've kind of just started recently, and that is strip tilling, especially in the live cover crop. So we work a lot with Luke. We've been working with Luke for probably 6 years now, I think, on cover crops and that, with a few crazy mixes and some more moderate ones, just depending on what we're doing with it. We've done anything from some long-term covers that we put in for over a year that we've grazed on, to a mix following, or preceding potatoes, preceding beets, following grain. So we have multiple mixes that we go with. We work a lot with higher diversity mixes. So our average count is probably sitting around that 6 different species mark. What we found with that, we get a little bit more soil health factor from that, because of the diversity, and we don't necessarily chase the nematode trapping like Luke does. We've kind of found some different routes to take care of our nematode through biological products that we're using, and that through the years. So I'm going to share some videos and a few pictures kind of how we started down the strip till road, and where we've kind of started and have gotten to. Part of the reason we started strip tilling with our corn and our sugar beets is we get a lot of wind where we're at, and so we've had a lot of years where we've lost a fair amount of beets to wind damage. And so we started with just cover crop and trying to no-till into it, and had some issues with that. And so then we went the strip till route, and so that's kind of where we've ended up at with that. And so I'll start kind of with the video here. Let me see if I can get this to share right. Okay, can everybody see this?
Looks good.
Okay, so this first video is a cover mix that we went into 2 years ago on some beets. This strip till bar we built 2 years ago. It's a ripper based system. And one thing, if you'll notice, is this video, I'll start this video in just a second, but kind of the heave that we're getting in where those shanks are going, we're kind of fracturing that soil, but we're not destroying the soil structure. And I think that's an important thing that we're seeing with the success that we're seeing on this with this strip till. So we've got a disc in front that kind of splits that residue, followed by the shank that's ripping about 14 inches deep, and then 2 discs following there that are kind of reconsolidating that back into the furrow, and then a packer wheel back behind it to firm that up, so we have a good seed bed to go into. All of our strip tilling is done in the spring, so we can strip that, and then within a few days we'll be back in with the planter. So this picture here is actually what we're getting out of that shank. So we're roughly 13 to 14 inches is what we're trying to get to with that shank on the depth. It gives us that channel, and you can see, this is a really good showing of what those cover crops can do. You can see the roots clear down there to the 4 inches off the bottom, showing right there, and just what kind of the texture of that soil and what we're getting out of the cover crops. This is another video that we were going into a 13-way mix that we had actually grazed for a year and a half. This is actually going to corn. And so this was stripped on the 1st of April of 22. And then this is what it looked like a month later. So we stripped it a month before we planted. And so looking down this, on the left-hand side is where we've planted. And then on the right, that's the next pass for the planter. So you can see where our strips were made then the cover is kind of filled in, but we've got that good seed bed where we can get in and get that crop planted. This is just a little bit closer picture of that same view. Like I say, this is a 13-way mix. It's kind of hard to tell here, but there is much more than what the grain and rye and that's in there. Last year we kind of revamped our bar just a little bit. We added a packer and offset our shanks, and so this is a video of last spring that we're going into of some. It was actually just a regrowth of barley, the spring barley that winter killed off, and then but it'll kind of give you a idea of what we're doing now a little bit more. We put a packer on to kind of flatten everything out. We were having a few problems with the planter being able to stay on track with the berms that we were leaving with the prior setup. This helped us solve that problem so that we could be able to keep the tractor on track with that. So this was part of our sugar beet crop. The thing that we've really noticed with that ripper shank, that gives just a channel for that root to start following. And we've really seen, for as small as those beets are, that root is just chasing down. And so that's about 10 inches deep right there on that shovel as to what we're seeing. And then we've really seen our earthworm population increase since we've gone to the strip till on the corn and sugar beets. The other interesting thing that we've seen on the beets as well is our uniformity within our stand. And so you can look at these 3 beets here. They were all pulled just in a random spot, 3 beets in a row. We've got very little variance on our weight, and the shape is they're almost exact clones of each other. And that's what one thing that we really noticed this year on our beets was just the consistency within the row of the size of the actual beets themselves. And so we've actually we feel that since we kind of started down this road, we've seen an increase in yield because of it between the cover crop and the strip till in our sugar beets. This last picture is just a picture of a 8-way cover crop mix that we've got in the ground right now that we will be strip tilling into this spring, that we'll be putting beets into. And so like I say, just the more root mass we can keep under that soil throughout the year, I think the better off we are. And like I say, we're doing cover crop in front of potatoes as well as beets. The small grains, we're not doing anything intermixed in with them at this time. But like I say, we've seen great success with the cover crops and that, and strip tilling.
Wow, that last picture of your soil, Blake, is incredible. Looks really amazing. The roots are going deep. What are some of the plants in that 8-way mix?
So that 8-way mix, I've actually got it pulled up here. So we got Phacelia. Like Luke said, he's a big fan of that, and we've really liked it. We got a purple top rutabaga, master white mustard, Berseem clover, Concord radish, purple top turnip, 7-top turnip, and an eco-till radish is what that 8-way mix that we've got in currently. And I guess a little bit of background on how we do our cover crops. So we've actually started taking our straw off in front of the beets just so we can get a better cover crop base. So we'll bale off the straw, and then we will come in and spread compost, and then we come in with the direct seed drill. So we've got a horse pronto that will handle some trash and that, and then we'll go in and seed that cover crop. Prior to the seeding, we will put down a liquid stubble digester mix that's got about 30 units of nitrogen with it, as well as some biologicals. And then we'll direct seed that cover crop into it and turn the water on. We've had great success with it. It's worked really, really well. We've actually, in talking with Luke, I think we're actually going to start backing our poundage off just because our stand is getting, I think, a little too thick on the cover crop. And like I say, that's kind of how we do it, both preceding potatoes as well as the sugar beets. We compost both in front of both of those crops, and then I'll just come in right behind it and drill the cover crop seed in.
And then the cattle come on after that gets established? Or
Depending on where we're at, we're spread out a lot. And so if we get enough growth on the stuff that's close to where the cattle are, then we will graze them. This year we didn't get enough growth on some of it because we were a little late on getting it in because we were tight on some water. And so we didn't actually get anything grazed this year over this winter. But most years, yes, we will try and get in there and graze that.
Gotcha. I don't think I've ever heard of a cover crop mix with that many roots in it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll see how well it works this spring, but we're pretty excited about it. It looks really good.
Any questions for Blake?
Blake, what about sugar contents? Were those for this strip till operation, or maybe you can just talk about sugar content in general over time as you've gone down this road?
So sugar content's kind of an interesting deal. So 3 years ago we were pretty well no-till beets all into cover crop, and then the last 2 years we've been strictly strip till into cover crop with the beets. The thing that we've noticed the last 2 years is it becomes very varietal dependent. We've got varieties that do very well on sugar, and it doesn't matter what the field is or the conditions or anything, they are this amount within the scale, and then other varieties are higher sugar content or lower. And so it's almost like we've seen a more of a dividing line within the varieties, as well as the brands of seed, at least on our farm. And so it's been interesting, but we've been able to maintain, if not improve, our sugar content compared to what we were at prior to going no-till and then on to strip till.
Great.
I think also too, we feel we've actually seen our yield starting to improve with the strip till. Part of that, I think, was that we were kind of developing a little bit of a hard pan, that when we tried to no-till, those beets would actually kind of hit that hard pan and then kind of flatten out instead of keeping that long tapered root. And where we've kind of given them that channel with that strip till, they've been able to kind of do what they're supposed to do. And so we see that longer taproot with that more traditional shape of the sugar beet.
Yeah, it's interesting how they go sideways and they hold up there. The water holds, everything holds up there, when you've got that situation. So that's great. You've been able to get past that.
Blake, what is it looking like when you're planting potatoes? Did you say you're also planting those into the cover as well?
So we will do some tillage before the potatoes just because they've got to get so deep. So we'll put in our cover in the fall, and then we will try and do it in one tillage pass in the spring. Sometimes it will take two to work that in, and then we'll flat plant the potatoes into that. And so there is still some tillage involved with them, just because trying to get that potato crop established in the depth where we need to is about impossible without it.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, any other questions for Blake or any of the other producers? I think everybody's still on here. Alrighty, well, sounds like people are gonna, that you answered all the questions already. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you again so much to our three producers for coming on here and speaking to us about the work that they're doing with root crops. It's been wonderful to listen to, and I think a topic that we haven't heard too much about yet. So it's a great way to get this conversation started. And like I said at the beginning, I've been recording this, so this recording I'll have time to edit it, and it'll probably be up on our YouTube page late next week at some point. So, but yeah, then again, I really appreciate Lad, Blake, and Luke coming on to talk to us, and thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, you guys. Those are great presentations, and you know, they really drive home the benefits of keeping things covered, keeping a live root in the ground, you know, minimizing disturbance, maximizing diversity. You all talked about here and there about incorporating livestock. It's just really good stuff. Thank you.
Right, and helping folks realize that the people who are growing root crops can be part of the soil health conversation as well. I think that's really important to get across.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.